Hello everyone and welcome to my very first proper writing vlog. I started writing a lot more often recently because I had 2 short stories that I had put on rest because my short stories and writing in general needs to rest when I'm moving in between drafts, and I just picked them back up again. And in the past few days I wrote about 4,000 words. I'm filming the intro and the voiceover to the writing sessions that I've been doing. You probably don't know this about me, but I mostly write in the morning. I feel like my brain is a lot clearer when I wake up. At the night for me is really the time to, lay in bed and just rewatch some familiar TV show and shut down my brain. But in the morning I can write, like the whole morning I could do it. And I don't specifically have a writing routine. I really just try to write in the morning, sometimes as I wake up, sometimes after I've done some reading, and it just works really well for me like that. Currently I'm doing 2 different short stories that, as I said, I had kind of laid to rest a little bit because I think the stories need some time to breathe. I need to get a different perspective. I need to, forget a little bit of what I've written so I can come back to it and just see it from a clean perspective, I guess. The first one, I think I've spoken about it here previously, is currently in draft 7. Draft 6 had about 11,000 words, which is a bit long for a short story, but I'm aware that some publications do accept longer short stories and others also accept this amount of words under a type of novelette. With this story, I'm currently at about 2,800 words for draft 7, and I'm loving writing this so much. I started writing this story a couple years ago when I was still at this job that was incredibly boring, and I literally, guys, had enough time when I was working, quote unquote, working from home. I had enough time to write, to make videos. This is when I created my main YouTube channel, was because I was so goddamn bored at this corporate job that I just decided to do stuff that was creative and that lit my brain on fire instead of just feeling like it was rotting in a cupboard somewhere in the office. So yeah, when I was working from home, I was often recording videos and writing stories. And the very first draft of this story I wrote all the way back then, which I think was like a year and a half ago. So this is I mean, I haven't been working on it the whole time. I definitely have had periods when it was just on a shelf for months, but I do take a long time to write, and I don't know, I don't mind it. I quite like it. I'm not expecting to make any money from it. Like, I'm not putting myself like the pressure of writing or doing any of this expecting to make money off of it. I'm just doing it because I have to. I'm one of those people that has characters in her head and has to write them down. So yeah. I'm currently in one of the final drafts. I'm still doing the thing because the way that I write, regardless of whether it's a short story or a novel, which I'm also writing right now, second draft, I always rewrite the whole thing for the majority of the drafts that I do. And currently in draft 7 of the story, I am still rewriting the whole document, but I have a sneaky feeling that this might be the last draft that I write the complete document from scratch. So I have like 2 documents on my screen, the draft 6 version and draft 7 version. Draft 6 version was the first draft I did on my computer. All the other drafts were handwritten because I always start writing everything with a pen and a paper. I know it's not like usual these days, but it's just how I do it. I mean, when I was a kid and I started writing stories just for myself, I didn't have a computer. I mean, we had one, but it was my mom's work computer, so it's like so I've always written stories on paper, and even though I understand it needs to go to the computer at some point because eventually I do want to submit the stories, it's just very later on the draft process for me, and this is how it works best. So I'm currently doing what I think is my final draft, rewriting everything, and I will probably, with this specific story, still have maybe a couple more drafts, but I will just, copy paste the body of text and edit it in a new document. I know it's a bit strange, I don't know if everyone does this, but I do like to keep a record of the different drafts, even if the edits on a later draft are very small, if they're not very significant. I still like to keep the record of the way I transition between drafts, not only because it shows me how much I can progress with one story, how much I can improve upon an original idea, but just because it shows the work, the amount of work, and I appreciate that for myself, if for nothing else. The second story I'm writing is currently close to 1,300 words. It's a smaller story. In total, the draft 5, which is the last draft I wrote on paper, has about 3,500 words, so it's a bit smaller, but this is a very different type of story for me because Hello everyone, Editing Joe here. I was just about to spoil you a big part of the story that I'm talking about, so I have to cut that out, and I'm going to explain it just in a much more simpler way, in the way that it doesn't spoil the story, because I don't want to talk about any of this until if it gets published. So what I was talking about was the fact that I started writing this story, this short story, from a different perspective. I started writing it from it's a first person narration, and I started writing it from the perspective of one of the characters that is in the story, but the perspective of this character was very melodramatic, very unrealistic. It is an important perspective, and it still exists in the story. It's just not the narration of the story. I felt like the narration had to be a lot more sober, a lot more realistic. It had to put the melodramatic aspect of it in context and to criticize it. So at some point, I think it was around the third draft, I switched perspectives and I started writing still first person narration, because the perspective of the narrator is important. Like, I couldn't do this story from a third person narration, and I only really write first person when I absolutely have to, when it is relevant to the story. If the perspective isn't relevant and it would be more beneficial to have a third person narrator, I will choose that anytime. But for this one, it has to be a person living the events to tell the story. So I just decided to go with a more sober perspective, with a person who had a more realistic, more appropriate reaction to what was happening. And yeah, because that's the message that I want to pass. I don't want to pass a melodramatic, exaggerated, whatever message of this event. So I just had to switch perspectives, and that's what I was talking about. But the way that I told it was just a big spoiler of a major aspect of the story. So yeah, there you go, back to the video. It's so tricky and so fun. Like, when I started writing this, I started writing the first story, and then I realized I don't love this. It's a bit traumatic. It's a bit unrealistic in a way that I don't think people would buy it. The emotion behind it is understandable, and the plot is compelling, and the characters are interesting, but the narration is being done from a biased, very kind of egocentric point of view. So I decided to kind of twist it, which is something that I do a lot with my stories. Like, I don't think I mentioned this before, but I had a short story be picked up for publishing earlier this year. I don't think I talked about it because I don't like to talk about this stuff unless I see it on paper, which I haven't, because it takes a long time. Maybe I never will, who knows. But with that one as well, I started writing from a completely different perspective, and then I thought, no, this is not what I want to say, so I just completely switched it on its head and wrote a different story from the same premise. And it's what I did as well with Project Response. I didn't like the original perspective, the original narration. It felt very dramatic, very forced, very unrealistic, even though the story was compelling. So I just had to find a different perspective, a more realistic, more sober perspective to tell this story that would still encapsulate the narration from the first story, that would still be able to reflect this very interesting plot, this very interesting event occurrence, but would criticize the narcissism of the initial story and tell it from a more realistic point of view. So that's my second short story that I'm working on, and I just there are really no words for the amount of joy that I'm feeling and that I feel when I'm writing. It just feels like the only right thing for me to do. I can't even freaking explain to you. And also in the middle of all of this, I've been gardening a lot. I think I'll put some shots here of my strawberries. Actually, they're not mine, they're my mom's, but I'm looking after them now. Of my little, I think it's coriander in English. I've also been arranging a little corner of my mom's side yard to make a little garden for myself. Maybe I'll show you the little flowers in it already. There's, I think, some grass growing already, the little spot of land where I planted it. I'm so happy doing physical activity. I think it's a good balance between like the very mentally consuming activity of writing, and it's just good for me to have physical activity. And usually I go on walks which are also mental health walks, but I've been enjoying gardening a lot, and I've been doing it a lot, and it's helping me a lot. So yeah, that's it for me today. If you enjoy this vlog, give me a like, subscribe, comment. I will be posting a lot more. I'm writing so much and reading so much. It's insane. Like today I started reading Hong Kong's Human Acts, actually last night, and it's just the way that I consumed a quarter of the book in one night and one morning. Anyway, you guys, I will see you, well, pretty soon. I'm gonna start recording writing vlogs back to back. So this is like the introduction for the first one, and I'm already going to record the introduction for the next one to start recording it now. So yeah, I will see you then.